Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckcom. My next episode is from a podcast that I was on called the Great Trials Podcast. Many of you may know that during my day job, I am a trial lawyer. I sue insurance companies mainly on behalf of families, children, husbands, wives, police officers, military veterans, doctors, lawyers, professionals, you name it. Anybody that's been injured or killed by a negligent corporation or insurance company is the kind of case I can handle. I had a very fascinating trial, a big case many years ago that involved piracy, and specifically the Maersk, Alabama getting captured by Somali pirates, and then the Navy SEALs coming in and taking those pirates out. They took out 3 of the 4 pilots. It was one of the most famous cases in the country at the time. It's still the most popular case, at least in terms of website visitors, that I've ever handled. And it's just a really interesting story about the intersection between the law and piracy and national security and corporate conduct and insurance company behavior. They actually made a movie out of the case called Captain Phillips, starring Tom Hanks, which is a really good movie, although there's a lot of factual errors in it. In any event, I was asked to come on the Great Trials podcast by 2 phenomenal lawyers and tell the story of the Maersk, Alabama, and the Captain Phillips case, and that's what this next show is about. I hope you enjoy the story of the Maersk, Alabama, and Captain Phillips.
Please rise. Court is now in session.
Welcome to the Great Trials Podcast. This is Steve Lowry with Yvonne Godfrey. Yvonne, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Steve. I'm broadcasting from basically the center of the sun. I have these
I know.
giant windows behind me.
I was going to describe to our listeners what we're seeing on Zoom, which is just this, hallelujah glory light that's behind Yvonne, and she just looks like the brightest angel you've ever seen.
She looks like an angel.
Exactly.
It looks very upscale. I'm actually sitting on the floor in a bedroom in my parents' house because I'm recording from over here, so it's not very glamorous. But
it looks glamorous.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here. We've got some fun stuff to talk, really interesting stuff to talk about today.
Today's show is fascinating, and I was thinking about trying to do something, witty about like the Pirates of the Caribbean or something. But this is not really the Pirates of the Caribbean. It's not really fun at all. And what our guest has come here to talk about is something that was tragic, and it's sort of a well-known story because everybody is familiar with the movie that came out of it, but as we're going to hear from Brian, the movie wasn't exactly accurate. But why don't we go ahead and introduce our guest, Brian Beckcom. Brian, I want to say hello to you, and then I'll let everybody know exactly who you are. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, Yvonne and Steve. I'm really looking forward to this. Y'all have a great podcast. We've been trying to connect for quite some time now, and I'm really excited that we've finally been able to do it.
Yeah, no, and I'm really looking forward to this episode because there's just some fascinating stuff to talk about. But let me tell everybody about you, Brian. So Brian Beckcom is a partner in VB Attorneys based out of Houston, Texas. And Brian has been practicing law for about 25 years. Has had just some tremendous verdicts and done great work. He is a graduate and an undergrad graduate from Texas A&M University, where he played basketball, and then went to the University of Texas Law School. He is a board-certified expert in personal injury trial law and has been on multiple national TV shows, including Nightline and Good Morning America. I want to make sure that we let everybody know that Brian has his own podcast as well. And so everybody should go check out Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckcom. And I should have said at the beginning that if you want to look up Brian, you can go to vbattorneys.com. That's vbattorneys.com. And in addition to being a great lawyer, Brian is an avid fly fisherman, a single-digit golfer, has an author of 6 books, and an expert, as we saw when he first came on to Zoom, an expert in jiu-jitsu. And Brian, it's just great to have you.
I'm super duper excited. That was That was a great introduction. You forgot one thing though. You said you said I'd been on Nightline and Dateline.
Yeah.
You forgot the Great Trials podcast.
That's right. Exactly. That's right.
The base feather in your cap.
I'm sure that'll go right to the top of your resume.
For sure. For sure.
That will be the next time a client looks you up. That'll be the closer. It's like, wait a minute, he's been on the Great Trials podcast.
Well, have you ever seen like in the movies where, somebody will be a struggling actor? Like I used to watch this show with my wife called Friends.
Oh yeah.
Joey's a struggling actor. And so if Joey got 2 seconds on some show, everybody, it was like the biggest thing in his career. So my Nightline appearance was about 10 seconds long. So this is actually going to be way more.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely.
You're the star of this one.
Exactly. My Nightline experience was basically Maersk is negligent and they need to pay my clients. And that was
that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, let's talk about the case that we're here to talk about. So we are here to talk about the true life story that is behind the movie Captain Phillips. But it involved a case that was, I think, if I read right, Brian, it was filed in Texas and then filed in Alabama. It was scheduled to be tried in Mobile, Alabama, and got settled in 2013, shortly before trial. But this stems out of the attack on the Maersk, Alabama, as it was going from, I think, Djibouti down to Mombasa, Kenya, and went through waters that were off the coast of Somalia. And there was the UN and others had essentially told ships that were going through this area that if they wanted to be safe, that if they wanted to be away from pirates, to stay about 600 miles off the coast. This ship that was captained by Captain Richard Phillips went about 250 miles off the coast, so much closer within this area that was known to be dangerous, known to be pirate infested. And then the day before the attack, so the attack was on April 9, 2009. The day before the attack, they spotted a small boat off of the stern. And for those of you who don't know, Yvonne, that's the back of the boat.
I didn't know that.
They spotted a small boat off the stern, and it was reported. They sounded the emergency. The crew gathered in the engine room, and that boat eventually went away. But then the next morning, there was a much bigger boat that ATM Reza, who's one of the crew members, had spotted that was coming towards them. He told Captain Phillips, and the captain essentially laughed at him and walked away, and said it was probably a shipping boat. And then within a few hours of that, Somali pirates were boarding the ship, taking the crew hostage. So essentially what happened, from what I understand, and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ATM Reza and Captain Phillips were on the bridge. The rest of the crew went to the engine room or the steering room and locked themselves or barricaded themselves in there. And then during the time that the captain and ATM Reza were being held, the leader of the pirates, a man named Abduwali Musa, took them down into the boat to try and find the rest of the crew. And as he was doing that, ATM Reza was able to try to make an escape. He actually stabbed him in the hand, stabbed the leader in the hand, and then they took him captive. So it became this standoff where some of the pirates had Captain Phillips captive, and some of and then the crew had the pirates leader Muse held as a prisoner, and they tried to make an exchange. So they tried to exchange Muse for Captain Phillips. The pirates basically Muse was able to get away, and they took Captain Phillips, got onto a lifeboat, and got off the boat, taking Captain Phillips with them. And then about a day later, I believe, the Navy came and was able to execute the rescue and help. And that is shown in the movie, where essentially they, through well-coordinated sniper work, took out 3 of the pirates, captured the leader Muse, and were able to rescue Captain Phillips. In addition to this issue of of going too close to the coastline of Somalia, was that at this time, this is April 9 of 2009. At this time, it was well known that pirate attacks, especially in this area, happened often. And Maersk Lines Limited basically didn't outfit the boat or the ship with any type of protection from pirates, didn't have a safe room, and didn't have any of the materials in order to like firearms or guards or anything like that to fight off an attack if it came. It basically because it would cost too much money. And so because of what happened, and there had been a number of injuries that happened in some of the scuffles, and then obviously a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder based on being held hostage. There was a lawsuit brought, and Brian and his firm represented 9 of the crew against Waterman Steamship Corporation and Maersk Lines Limited for what happened on Maersk, Alabama. And as I said, we're scheduled to go to trial in 2013, and the case settled for a confidential amount shortly before that. So that's the overall view of the case. Brian, did I miss anything on what we?
No. That was a great job. I'm not really sure what else there is to talk about today.
Okay, and that's our show. Great show.
Yeah. Loved it. I hope everybody listening to the show is ready to pay my clients a bunch of money based on their description.
That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, so I guess the first place I wanted to start, Brian, is how does, because I noticed, and I should have said this when I was introducing you, this isn't the only case on the open seas that you've handled. This isn't the only pirate attack case that you've handled. This was brought under the Jones Act, I believe. And how does one go about becoming the lawyer to represent crews that have been attacked by pirates, out on the seas?
Yeah. So let me be clear before I get started. I am not a quote pirate lawyer.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Like when I handled this case, I was having people calling me from literally all over the world about pirate issues because, this case was all over the news, and Tom Hanks played Captain Phillips, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the short answer to the question is I've practiced maritime law as part of my personal injury practice for the entire time I've been doing it, which is 22 years now. So, I do a lot of Jones Act cases, and these cases happen literally all over the world. And I love the practice. It's very complicated in many respects, but I really, really enjoy it. And what happened was I got a call. The bar that does these kind of cases, a maritime bar, is really small. There's not many lawyers on my side of the docket that do this on a consistent basis. I'll bet I do more maritime cases in 1 year than 99.9% of lawyers will ever do for as long as they live. So it's a small bar, and the galley hand for the Maersk, Alabama called me up, and the galley hand is basically one of the cooks. And he said, essentially, will you represent me? This is before there was anything about a movie, anything about Tom Hanks. Now, of course, it was in the news because of Navy SEALs, and that was super cool, although there's some interesting details about that I think your listeners might be interested in that you didn't mention. But in any event, this was before any of the publicity in terms of like the Tom Hanks movie or the Hollywood stuff. And what happened was essentially the crew comes back and they get together with Captain Phillips, and they say, let's do a book about this. This is going to be a big deal. And Captain Phillips tells them to screw off. Essentially, I'm going to do this by myself. I don't want to have anything to do with you guys. I'm going to write my own book and I'm going to make money on my own. And so the crew was like, wait a second. You were the one that got us into this thing to begin with. It's your screw ups. It's your completely ignoring all of these warnings you got that led to this in the first place. So the crew basically got together and Needham said, we got to make sure the truth comes out. And what I think, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are lawyers, but I think a lot of people that are lawyers are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. If there's some listeners that aren't lawyers, you might not know, but a lot of times when people bring lawsuits, it truly is about something in addition to the money. It's about closure, or it's about, I want to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody again, or I want the truth to come out. I don't want it to get buried. And what was happening is the crew truly wanted people to know the truth. And the truth, I tell people ask me, I literally was at the premiere of Captain Phillips that night. I was at the movie with my wife, and people were like, so what was it like? And I said, well, let me put it this way. I loved Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
But that's all made up too, right? So the movie takes great liberties with the truth. Now, what do you expect? It's Hollywood. They do that all the time. So I'm not complaining about that or anything. But the only thing the movie really got right ultimately was there was an American ship that was attacked by Somali pirates. Everything else, all the details are essentially made up. But in any event, so the galley hand calls me and I say, okay, I'll take it, not thinking it would be a big deal. No, kind of normal Jones Act case. And then all of a sudden I got half the crew and I'm driving home. I filed a lawsuit. Okay. And I'm driving home on I-10 and, I get a call on my cell phone from Nightline. Hey, this is such and such from Nightline. We just saw you filed this case. We want to do a story on it. Okay. When do you want to do it? How about 10 minutes? Okay. Where?
Right.
How about your house?
Yeah.
You have my address? Blah, blah, blah. They get the address. I'm like, wow, you got a good research department. So I'll see you there in 10 minutes. I call my wife. Hey, honey, Nightline's going to be at the house in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Been doing an interview. So she goes crazy as many homemakers that like their house to look good. She's in there cleaning the house up and making it look as good as they can. Nightline shows up. I did this interview and the whole thing explodes. The one interesting part of this is everybody loves Tom Hanks. I mean, Tom Hanks is probably the most popular actor right now, has been for quite some time, or at least one of them. And so I was begging the judge. By the way, this case was actually in 3 different places at one time. It was in Houston, Alabama, and Norfolk, Virginia at one time. It was also on appeal twice, and I won both those appeals. That's one of the reasons it took so long. It was a jurisdictional nightmare, right? So, and I'm going to ask you guys to think about this while I'm talking. Where do you file a case that happened off the coast of East Africa, where every single person on the vessel is from a different place, and the putative defendants are Somalis? Where do you file that case? Think about that for a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
I'm going to go with Houston, Texas.
Yeah, well, that's one place.
That's right.
But how do you keep it there? So,
right.
So, yeah, but in any event, so I get the case, the movie comes out, the publicity starts happening, and it ultimately ended up in Mobile, Alabama, against Maersk, not Waterman, against Maersk. Waterman was still in Houston, and that's a whole legal, mumbo jumbo I could talk about if you want to.
I guess I should have explained. So Waterman was the company that supplied the crew, right?
That's right. Yeah, they're a crewing company. Maersk is the operator essentially, and that's a fairly standard way to set things up in this kind of deal. But in any event, I go to the judge and I say, Your Honor, Tom Hanks is playing Captain Phillips. I mean, can we please go to trial before the movie comes out? Otherwise, I'm going to be completely and totally prejudiced. And because, every trial has to have a bad guy. And Captain Phillips was kind of my bad guy.
Right.
But how do you make Tom Hanks a bad guy? I mean, the few movies he's been in where he's a bad guy is like his worst acting job. So
right. Yeah.
I don't even believe it. Yeah. But the judge, and of course, all the defense lawyers, and there was tons of them there. Oh, no, we'll ask them all. We'll voir dire the heck out of them and blah, 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 blah. We don't need a rush. We don't need a rush. So the judge denies my request to move the trial date up. And as a result, the movie comes out and I get millions and millions of dollars of free publicity. It was like, I look back on that, I'm like, man, I am so glad.
Yeah, exactly.
that I was still working on this case when the movie actually premiered, because I mean the level of interest was unbelievable. And believe it or not, 12 I know exactly what website pages on my website are the most popular. These pages where we write about the story and all that stuff are 10 times as more popular than any other page on my website still today. It's really amazing how interesting people find this story. So that's kind of how I ended up with the case. I mean, again, there's only a limited number of people that would be qualified to do this case.
Right. Yeah.
And I happen to be one of them. And I happen to get the first call is kind of what it amounted to.
When the galleon called you, and obviously it's before there's this Hollywood spin, because it's before the movie's really in the works. But at that point, I guess either based on your experience or your expertise, did you already know, like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a case, or was it something you really had to kind of dig into more into what you were being told? And, like what kind of, how does the sort of like fact finding that you're able to do work in that kind of situation early on?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I didn't know. I had done another kidnapping case off the coast of West Africa before this case, where 3 Ukrainian sailors that were working for a Louisiana-based company got kidnapped. Basically, at least it used to be a business off the coast of West and East Africa, kidnapping people and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But when I got this case, I'll tell you the thing I did know, and because everybody knew this at the time, or most people that were geopolitically relatively informed, that East Africa was having tons of problems with piracy. And so I did know that was going on. And I did know that there had been plenty of ships and plenty of people attacked and kidnapped. What I didn't know was what kind of legal theories I would bring, whether those legal theories would be something that the court would entertain or not. So I'll give you one example. One of the legal theories is very simple. If you're going into this is one of the things as lawyers we love. So when I filed the petition, I described the area as pirate infested waters. Okay. Every single news story that ever wrote about this called it pirate infested waters.
Yeah.
They adopted it. So the point is, if you're going in, my first claim was, I had 2 claims. If you're going into pirate infested waters and you know it, the crew has to have some way to defend themselves. Okay. The second claim was what you described earlier. And I found this out a little bit later, by the way. They were specifically told there's a range that if you're outside this range, these quote pirate boats, and by the way, they're not pirates, they're fishermen, and most of them are teenagers. They're poor Somali teenagers in little crappy boats that can only go out so far. And so if you stay outside that perimeter, you're completely safe. Well, he went twice as close as was recommended in order to save fuel costs, which saves money. So, but you would have thought, Yvonne, to answer your question, when I said you should arm them or something, that, I mean, the entire, most of the maritime ships are insured by London syndicates, Lloyd's of London, and other what are called P&I clubs. And you would have thought I said, the Lord Jesus Christ was actually the devil, the way they reacted to this, because I mean, they were like, arming the crew? Are you kidding me? and I found out, by the way, later on that the underwriters historically had refused to allow the crew to carry weapons because they were afraid they were going to kill each other or they were going to blow up the cargo. So it was the insurance companies, like a lot of the stuff that was driving all these decisions. You can't arm the crew because they're too stupid to take care of themselves. Anyway, I didn't know if that theory would hold water or not. I can tell you this is something I'm probably one of the proudest things in my whole legal career. To my knowledge, There has not been a single successful pirate attack on an American ship since this case. Why? Because they're all armed now. And what these pirates do is they're not looking to get into a firefight. They're looking for the softest possible target. So you throw a couple rounds out into the ocean when they're coming after you, they just move on to the next vessel.
Yeah.
And so this case really changed the way the industry did business. We talk about lawsuits having a positive effect all the time. Well, this one did. It had a real positive impact. Now, and I want to make one real brief distinction before I start talking about this. When I say the pirates are pirates, they're teenagers and fishermen and stuff, it's completely different off the coast of West Africa. These are trained, the Boko Haram. I've had some cases where people were attacked by legitimate mercenaries that were trained by the Nigerian military and stuff like that. So, and that's also, by the way, where a lot of American oil companies have business. And so it's a different ballgame. It's way more dangerous. They are true pirates, mercenaries. They are truly, truly dangerous. They're well armed and they're well trained. So it's kind of a different calculus when you're talking about West Africa. But Yvonne, that's a long way of saying I didn't know what the cases were. I didn't know whether the theories would hold water or not. I can tell you that as I started getting into this case, it became very clear to me that there was just screw up after screw up after screw up after screw up. I don't know if you remember from the movie, there's a scene where they're shooting water cannons off the side of the boat. They didn't have those. There was a scene where they're shooting noise things to distract. They didn't have those. The weapon that ATM Reza, who was one of my clients, used was a fork. And I don't know if you know or if you saw that there were 4 pirates. One of them survived. And when they were perp walking him in federal court, it was the first piracy prosecution, but criminal prosecution, by the way, in like 100 years in the United States. And they're perp walking him, and he had an eye patch on, because his eye was injured. And that's because ATM Reza stabbed him not only in the hand, but he tried to stab him in the eye. So, but they literally had no protection at all, zero, nothing. I mean, they're fighting people off that have AK-47s using utensils. So, but anyway, I didn't know what was going to happen. It ended up being a fairly substantial legal theory. And I was able to use it. I represented a former Marine Corps captain who got kidnapped and taken into the jungles of Nigeria for 18 days and tortured by Boko Haram affiliated mercenaries. And I was able to use a lot of the things that I learned in the Captain Phillips case. That guy's name was Captain Thomas, Ren Thomas, in the Captain Thomas case. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you describe it, I mean, the theory makes perfect sense, because I was almost thinking of this like, we handle some inadequate security cases, we would call them, like where, there's a criminal activity at, say, a hotel or a shopping center where there's been a number of violent crimes that have happened there, and they don't do anything to cut down on that, and then your client ends up getting injured there. From my understanding, there had been multiple attacks in this same area leading up to this day, and in fact, I thought I saw somewhere that there was 39 attacks like the week before this one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it was off the charts. And when we started plotting on graphs the location and frequency of attacks, I mean, there's more dots than there is white space. It was a really, really, really bad time to be in that area, and especially bad time when you were an American merchant ship with no way to defend yourself. The other thing is, I don't know if they still do this, but a lot of these ships used to carry essentially blackmail cash or payoff cash, and they had, I forget the exact number, I want to say it was like $30,000 in cash in the ship's safe, which nobody ever found, by the way. There's some suspicion that SEALs maybe know something about that. It's real kind of weird how that happened. But the point is the pirates, I mean, they see this ship and it's like, why wouldn't I attack it? I mean, there's going to be tons of untraceable cash and they have no way to defend themselves. I mean, that's just like asking. That's just asking to be attacked, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if before I really didn't know any of this stuff until we were getting ready to talk to you basically. And I was reading some of the articles that you had written and your videos. And because I think you think of something like this, I'm sure I thought this, especially when the actual news story happened, as it just being sort of this unforeseeable thing, this sort of unforeseeable criminal act versus, the fact that there was actual guidance about how far to stay away and how foreseeable it was really like, I had no idea. That
You're
contract.
making me smile. You're making me smile, Yvonne, because I'll tell you the question that I used to get a lot was, so did you sue the pirates?
Right.
Well, who'd you sue? Like, who did you sue?
Yeah.
Well, I sued Mariston Captain Phillips. Well, why didn't you sue the pirates? Well, first of all, pirates don't have any fucking money. Sorry for my language. But,
And 3 of them were dead.
you know what I mean? And they were dead.
Right.
And the other thing, by the way, the one that survived is in federal prison still today. And there was a huge question about whether he was even old enough to be tried as an adult because the records in Somalia are essentially non-existent. So they couldn't prove how old he was. They couldn't prove whether he was a minor or not. But yeah, the whole thing was kind of interesting. And people, did you sue the pirates? No, I sued the shipping company. Why do you sue the shipping company? Well, they were told to stay 200 nautical miles off the coast, and they went twice as close. Now.
Yeah.
And people start going like, oh. And they didn't have, then there were 39 pirate attacks a week before, and they had no way to defend themselves. What? And the British Maritime Agency told ships they either needed to stay off the coast of Somalia during this time or to have a way to defend it. Oh, now I'm starting to. So that's Yvonne. That was a question I used to get a lot, is whether I sued the pirates.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that's something a lot of our listeners can relate to in terms of when we do get these cases that overlap with a criminal actor who's has no money and is going to be in jail or is.
It does bring up a question for me. Under the Jones Act, if you had tried this case, would there have been an argument by the defense to apportion fault to the pirates?
That's okay. We're going to go all law nerdy if you
exactly.
That's actually one of the reasons why the Jones Act, Steve, is so complex. And
right.
One of the things that I really focused on, matter of fact, I wrote my law review article on it when I was at UT, is the interaction between federal and state jurisdiction, and in particular, Erie and reverse Erie, which for people who don't know what that means. In other words, when does federal law trump state law? When does state law trump federal law? The Jones Act is a federal law. And so it's been quite an interesting thing to watch what happens, like when Texas passed proportionate responsibility, where essentially if a plaintiff is more than 51% negligent in Texas, they don't get anything, right?
Yeah.
In Virginia, by the way, it's 1%.
Right.
So let's not complain too much about what
right.
we've got. But the Jones Act is pure comparative fault, pure comparative fault. And so I've argued successfully in every single case that you cannot allow the state proportionate responsibility statute to trump the Jones Act because it speaks directly to the issue. What you're talking about is, at least in Texas, we kind of have this responsible third party, empty chair kind of idea. And like, for example, I don't think they can designate them as a responsible third party, because the basic question in that analysis, again, not to get super legal nerdy on you, is the law substantive or procedural? And
right.
My reading of the law, and I think the proper framework is, if it has to do with substantive rights, for example, how much damages you can collect, what your statute of limitation is, what claims you can bring, those are substantive. And so those are going to trump every single state law. So we never got to the point. Steve, they never designated the pirates as responsible third parties. They would have argued at trial. They would have tried to empty chair him and said, well, why is he suing us? It was these pirates that got killed by the SEALs that did everything. And I think they would have tried to make that argument. Of course, I would have told the judge ahead of time that argument was improper, because they shouldn't be on a charge because the Jones Act doesn't contemplate that kind of thing. So that would have been an argument that would have been quite a good argument. I'm not sure how it would have come out because we never got to that stage, but that's a really, really good question, actually.
Some of these articles that you had written, Brian, it seemed like, and you clarify if I'm wrong with this timeline, but it seemed like some of the articles you had written are sort of these statements that you had made about what had really happened in the case versus how it was depicted or going to be depicted in the movie. Reading those, I thought, okay, timeline wise, it was after the movie was out, but before you were able to try your case, and which obviously you ultimately did not do. But at that point, were you thinking about trying to get the word out to even potential jurors? Or are you thinking I would just want the truth out because I wanted the truth out for my clients? Because it was really informative, and luckily, people can still watch some of those videos and read those articles. But I'm just wondering, time wise, for you, how that fit into when everything happened.
Yeah, I love that question, because I think as trial lawyers, we have a responsibility if our clients' cases are being affected by media to fight back. And the problem that I was facing, and this is why I literally asked the judge to move the trial date up so this wouldn't be an issue. And the defense didn't want to do it. And the judge didn't want to do it. Okay, well, fine. Now I got to fight this. I mean, they're coming out, and Hollywood is spending millions and millions and millions of dollars to make Captain Phillips look like a hero. It's Tom Hanks. I feel like part of my job as a trial lawyer is to fight back and make sure that the real story gets told. And frankly, that's what my clients wanted me to do to begin with. Like they literally instructed me to do exactly that. And I'll tell you one thing. So I have my undergraduate degrees in computer science. I've been super interested in technology since the early 90s. And I was really, really proud of how we were able to me and my partner, basically, just this little boutique law firm in Houston, we took on Hollywood and we beat them. Like, the narrative out there, at least when I was on this case, every single time you saw an article about this case, there was always something there that said, but there's currently a lawsuit that questions whether a lot of the stuff in the movie is true. So pirate infested waters, that phrase was bouncing around everywhere. And that was because of what we were doing to try to counter this big publicity push. But the point is I feel like, and not only that, guys, but I feel like not only do we have an obligation to our specific clients, if the publicity, and I actually think most states' ethical rules say that you have a right, if there is bad publicity, to comment in a way favorable to your clients. I think that's actually written. It's either written into the rules or there's case law that says that. So, which makes total sense. But I think it's bigger than that. Like, I think the obligation is bigger than that. I think we have an obligation to educate the public about what's really going on. And what's really going on most of the time, as you guys know, is it's some insurance company with a bunch of pencil neck bean counters that are trying to nickel and dime people to death. And they make all the decisions. And people are like, oh, is this somebody who just got hit with some poor grandma got hit for $40 million. And I'm like, that grandma didn't get hit for anything. It was some insurance company in the background making decisions. We're not allowed to talk about that in court. Why? Because the insurance companies know if we do, the jurors are going to look at the case differently, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel a real obligation to educate the public as well. I don't know if you guys have kept up with the Astroworld case in Houston, where a bunch of kids got killed at a Travis Scott concert.
Right.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people got hurt. I've been heavily involved in that case since the very beginning. Travis Scott and Drake, these two pieces of you-know-what, after these 10 kids are killed, are partying at the club that night at a strip club. And they've got, obviously, a tremendous reach in their publicity. And so I was shooting YouTube videos that were getting 30, 40,000 hits, views or whatever you want to call it, until the judge put on a gag order on everybody. But one of the reasons I was doing that was Travis Scott and Drake and all these nitwits are up there. You know, Drake, the tough gangster, he used to be a Disney Musketeer. Anyway, they're literally, yeah. And Kanye is a gangster. Both his parents are college professors. But anyway, anyway, the point is I learned a lot in the Captain Phillips case about how to make sure the narrative in the stratosphere, whatever you want to call it, is not negative for my clients. And so I've used what I've learned in that case a bunch since then.
You know, it's a really good point, and I agree with you. But I think it's something that a lot of lawyers, a lot of practicing lawyers struggle with is when there's been a a case that ends up being high profile and like you were up against probably the biggest media machine out there, and sort of pumping how great this movie was going to be and how great Captain Phillips was and what a hero he was. To take on that and to try and keep the narrative at least fair is just a huge undertaking. And
Steve, keep in mind too, I should have mentioned this earlier. Keep in mind that I was fighting with one hand tied behind my back. The Hollywood people could literally say whatever they wanted to. I was under a confidentiality order. There's still a bunch of stuff I can't talk about as far as the details of what went on in the case because the confidentiality still lives. I took Captain Phillips' deposition up in the Northeast for 2 days. I'm not allowed to talk about it at all. As a matter of fact, somebody gave Captain Phillips' deposition transcript to a CNN reporter. Maris then blamed it on me and tried to say that I was and I did not do that. And if there's a confidentiality order, I'm a rule follower when it comes to that sort of thing. Like I follow the rules, and I expect my opponents to follow the rules too. And if you don't follow the rules, I'm going to call your ass on it. But you can't be calling people on breaking the rules if you don't follow it yourself. So the point is Hollywood was saying all this stuff, and I'm literally trying to punch back. But there was things that there's things I still can't say that if I could would be rather dramatic. I'll kind of get around the edges of it a little bit here. Every single vessel has to have a VSOP when they're in international waters. It's a vessel security plan, VSP.
I saw some reference to that in one of the opinions on it, I think. So
yeah, and that's like the recipe for Coke, essentially. Like, and it makes sense. Like, you do not want people knowing what your security plan is. And I was like, when they said, let's do confidentiality on that, I'm like, absolutely. I don't want to put any more sailors at risk. You guys put more of them at risk already. Right. Like, I don't want to make it worse for them. So, but the point is that the publicity thing was like, I felt like I was pretty severely handicapped in terms of what I could say. But again, I feel like most people that are familiar with this movie are also familiar with the fact that it's kind of made up in many respects.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's. I'm glad you bring that up because I think to your point, we have all these obligations as lawyers and all these rules that we have to follow that your average person doesn't. And I think you can fall into this sort of default. I know I have. With clients, especially when a case is early or ongoing and you haven't deposed anybody yet and things like that. But, clients who are upset and who want to get the word out, they, sort of navigating that line of wanting them to be heard or feel heard or wanting to get a safety message out, but also being worried. I don't want this. I don't want anything that they say or I say to be used to hurt them or against them later. I always feel like that there's that. I'm always those wheels are always churning in my brain when I think about saying anything to the press or anything public.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, it's just tough. But I like the way you phrase it in terms of, well, we have an obligation to do that if it's something that's potentially going to be used to hurt our client or skew our client's story.
Well, 100%. And think about this, think about the term ambulance chaser. Okay, that term was made up by some insurance dork sitting in a conference room trying to make us look bad. And what that means is, generally speaking, is somebody gets hurt and they run out to the scene and they chase down the ambulance to try to sign them up. Okay. No lawyers really do that anymore. And if they do, they can get thrown in jail. Okay. Right. You know who does that? Insurance adjusters. The second some catastrophe hits, they are at the scene trying to get people. When the Deepwater Horizon blew up, trying to get people to sign papers. They are the real ambulance. I mean, that is legitimately ambulance chasing. And due to the nature of the cases that I handle some fairly substantial cases. And so they're substantial events. I mean, there are 50 insurance adjusters swarming all over every explosion scene that I'm at. We have a joke down here in Houston in the plaintiff's bar. You know, these oil companies are constantly blowing up plants. And there's never been anybody ever hurt, according to the oil companies, in those explosions. Because literally the first thing they say is, there are no injuries, right? And then you find out that 25 people are, burned all over their bodies or something like that. So, but the point is I think we lose sight as trial lawyers of the fact that it really is skewed against individual human beings. And those are the people that we represent. And so we have a lot of things we have to do to level the playing field, and showing up in court and trying the case is just part of it. That's not all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, Brian, if this case had gone to trial, other than what we've already talked about, what did you anticipate their defense was going to be, other than blaming the pirates?
That was going to be the primary defense. I think the secondary defense would have been, the classic. And I was at a firm that's not named this anymore, called Fulbright and Jaworski in Houston. So I was a defense lawyer for a few years. I was around some very, very good defense lawyers. And there was one guy named Anway Denny. He's a good friend of mine still today. And he had the older he got, the worse his cases got. I mean, he'd have the case where, a busload of nuns get hit by a UPS driver on meth. And he's got to go down there and figure out, how the hell am I going to defend this? And he has the classic defense, which would be, look, this was horrible. We were definitely at fault. We need to pay, but these people are insane how much money they want. And so Awe was very, very good at not pissing people off. That would be one of in the indefensible cases, that would basically be his strategy. I mean, I remember there was a defense one, that was some sort of oil case, and Awe was like, Mr. Plaintiff's lawyer, this well wasn't successful, so he wants to dig a well right here in the courtroom, and you jurors so that was kind of, so I think they would have poo-pooed the damages a little bit. The damages were actually, they were a little troublesome because, and I'll tell you this too, I used to think PTSD was made up nonsense, like a lot of us. I've had enough people with PTSD to know that I would rather have a back injury than have PTSD. If you have true PTSD, it is absolutely debilitating. It's the only thing you can think about morning, noon, and night. And what they did to my clients was they stuffed them into a closed room that was like 125 degrees for 14 hours, and they had no food, no water. Many of them had heart problems afterwards that continued after the fact. Obviously, they were all thought they literally thought they were going to die of dehydration. And ultimately, the SEALs were able to release them. But 14 hours in a 10 by 10 room that's 120 degrees with no food and water, while your captain's out there and they're doing God knows what to them, these guys suffered pretty, and these are tough guys too, by the way. Yeah. People that work on these ships are not wimps. And so, it takes quite a bit for them to even talk about PTSD. I think, thankfully, I hope you guys have seen this too. Thankfully, I think the kind of negative connotations for people with mental illnesses are kind of going away. I had a problem with panic attacks about 10 years ago, so I've kind of had a personal experience with this. And like I said, man, I'd rather have a broken arm or a back injury than have, PTSD or some sort of mental issue. So, but that's where they would have, maybe 10, 12 years ago, people would have been a little less understanding about how these kind of incidents leave scars in your brain, not just your body.
Yeah. And the tough thing about those cases is that, to look at the person, to talk to them, they seem relatively normal. And, to really express what they're going through. And think about these guys is, this is what they do for a living. This is, how they're supporting their families. And so, they're going to be asked if they want to keep their job to go back out on the water again. And that's got to be in their mind that this could happen to them, and how are you going to do your job?
Yeah.
The boat captain that, Captain Thomas, who I still keep up with, he had PTSD so bad that there's a company in California, a guy that raises PTSD dogs for military veterans. They're like $30,000 per dog. And he my guy was an ex-Marine. He had seen something about his story on the news, and he called him up, said, "Come out to California. I want to give you one of these dogs." And so this was it was truly a PTSD dog, a big dog too, like a Rottweiler looking thing. And his name was Bo. Captain Thomas got Bo. When Captain Thomas gave his deposition, Bo was sitting there right next to him. When he would come to my office, Bo would be sitting there right next to him. When I see him on Facebook, Bo's getting really old now, and I'm a little worried about what Captain Thomas is going to do once Bo goes to doggy heaven. But
yeah,
I saw with my own two. First of all, I saw with my own two eyes what this experience had done to Captain Thomas, and I saw with my own two eyes once he got a PTSD dog, what a difference it made. And so anyway, that's a very long way of saying they probably would have attacked the PTSD damage. The other thing from a legal perspective is there's this idea you can't, under the Jones Act, recover for purely psychological loss. So there had to be some sort of physical something. And so the 125-degree heat with no water was the physical act that led to the PTSD. But that's frankly a stupid rule in 2023.
Yeah.
You should be able to recover for purely mental injuries because they exist and they're real. And in many respects, they're worse than physical injuries.
Yeah.
And they really are physical, right? Especially something like PTSD. They really do. I don't even really think that distinction makes sense anymore.
Yeah. That's, and I'm so glad you said that, Yvonne, because I'm going to start saying the same thing. You're 100% right. There's a physical piece to it. And the more we understand about the brain and the hormonal system and all that,
exactly.
The more we'll be able to figure out what physically is going wrong. That's one of the best comments I've heard in a long time. I'm gonna start.
Nice.
Next time some defense lawyer gets up there and says, "Mr. Beckcom cannot recover for only physical injuries," I'm gonna have a doctor say, "Actually, his cortisol levels and this are off because of hormones. This is a physical injury." That is a beautiful argument, and I'm stealing it, and I will give you credit for it. I've never heard that before. Seriously, that's a game-changing argument. So thank you for giving me that.
Well,
and I just have to know. I mean, you heard it here first. The Great Trials Pray.
Exactly.
No, but I mean, it's true. And I do think, just to your point before we move on, because I do think it's really important, is that I have seen an improvement, I feel like, in people understanding those kinds of conditions and how those, even with addiction, how things like that can be more physical and more of a disease and something that has actual observable markers. And I think the more people talk about it and the more we talk about that for our clients, the more other people are then willing to talk about it and realize that everybody has somebody in their family, if it's not themselves, who has one or more of these issues. And so I am happy to see that improvement. I think less and less of that has to be explained to people as more folks are willing to talk about it in general.
Yeah, I mean, it is changing, but I still think we have a long ways to go. And I even see it, sometimes when, lawyers have a hard time expressing it for their clients, and to really explain what, and show what the clients are going through. So I agree that we are making progress, but I think we got a long ways to go to talk about mental health issue. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
for sure.
Well, Brian, I mean, this has been just a great show and really fascinating topic. I want to remind everybody we've been talking about the attack that happened in April of 2009 on the Maersk, Alabama, off the coast of Somalia, and the case that Brian Beckcom and his partners handled in getting justice from Maersk Line Limited. And Brian, I just want to ask you, is there anything that we haven't talked about? Actually, there is something that just popped into my head. Are you able, you mentioned as sort of a teaser right at the beginning about something that happened during the Navy SEALs rescue. If there's something you can share, I'd love to hear it.
So I'll talk about it as much as I can. So like I said, every one of these ships, I'm sure with some exceptions, but generally speaking, they would have some sort of cash on hand for the specific purpose of paying bribes and kidnapping ransom money. And most ships had that. You said something when you were describing the case that was a little bit inaccurate. The way the movie depicted the SEALs taking out these pirates wasn't exactly the way that happened. It was pictured as a real precision operation.
Right.
There were actually, I think, 100+ rounds fired in this little small vessel. I mean, they laid into this thing, and they think that the cash somehow went from the Maersk, Alabama to this rescue capsule, and then it disappeared. Nobody has ever found it. Nobody knows what happened to it. There was some talk about, did the SEALs take this? Frankly, I come from a military background. I'm kind of thinking if these guys took a little bit of this, I don't really care that much.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But everybody wanted to know, like, what happened to the 30 grand? Like,
Right.
did Captain Phillips shove it in his pants on the way? You know,
Right.
it's still, the point is, it's still never been accounted for, and nobody knows why. But yeah, super interesting. And I think I told the part about the fact that there's potentially a former child who got convicted of piracy that's sitting in federal prison right now and will be for, I think, the remainder of his life, if I remember. So that was kind of neat. But
yeah,
you know, yeah.
So I was just going to say that is one other thing that we didn't really talk about is like how this pirating came to be in Somalia that you write about on your website. That, you know, basically that their fishing waters had been destroyed by toxic dumping, and so you have all these guys who made their living off of fishing and then couldn't do that, and so it slowly over time, or maybe quickly over time, became piracy.
I often ask myself, I hear people complaining about countries like Mexico or Somalia or other countries. And I often ask myself this question. Let's take Mexico, for example. I think the problems in Mexico are 100% the fault of the United States drug policy. And there were no cartels in Mexico until the dumbest public policy decision in history, the stupid drug war, which has never succeeded, will never succeed, has resulted in trillions of dollars of wasted money, people in prison, families, and it hasn't had any effect on the drug war at all. And it's created, you want to stop the immigration problem, stop the drug war. You stop that immediately. You want to stop the violence in minority communities in Chicago, stop the drug war. So the point is, Somalia was a failed country. In addition to the fishing areas being polluted. And I often wonder, because maybe it's just my personality, I often wonder, do we have something to do with that? Like, or the policies that we push often have unintended consequences. Like, in other words, the drug war was originally motivated by pure racism. I mean, that's on the record. Like, it's literally Richard Nixon talking to H.R. Haldeman on tape, talking about how hippies and minorities are the ones that do drugs, and they vote Democrat, so let's crack down on them. So, but some of these policies, I think, were well-intended, some of the geopolitical policies, but they end up having consequences that none of us want. And Somalia, you guys remember Black Hawk Down. I don't know if that reference is too old, but we've been in Somalia for quite some time. And as far as I can tell, it hasn't gotten much better. So at some point, you got to start asking yourself, I think Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. I think we should ask ourselves tough questions about, in other words, I think the easy thing and the immature thing to do is say, it's all Mexico's fault. It's all Somalia's fault. It's all this country's fault. It's all Iran's fault. Iran's a great example. The Iranian people, by and large, are super pro-Western. They love America. It's a small subsection of their leaders. The problem is our policy hurts everybody. And so we're turning people against us maybe when we don't need to. So that's just my way of saying, like, the Somalia issue was, I think we need to look in the mirror sometimes about some of this stuff and say, are some of our policies causing some of these problems? Because if I was a fisherman in Somalia and the decision was for my family to starve or get on a boat and go try to get some money from some undefended ships, I know what decision I would make. If I was in Mexico and having to deal with these cartels, I would do whatever I could to get away from them. And I think most of us would. So I don't blame the Somalis as a country or anything like that. They just had some very, very, very difficult circumstances and still do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, at least from their eyes, if they go out to get some money from these ships, they probably view those ships as the ones that were destroying their waters in the first place. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
Well, now that we've stirred the political pot a little bit, I just want to say,
did while we were talking about that, I did come up with this is really going to be my best idea for the podcast.
All right.
You remake Captain Phillips, you do exactly the same, like super skewed that he's like a good guy, but then at the end you show that he has the $30,000, and it would be like the next Usual Suspects. You know what I mean?
And he could be like walking away, looking back at the camera.
And then be like, have $30,000 in the.
What I thought you were going to say is I would have ChatGPT write the script about the real way everything went down and have the real thing told for the.
We could do that too.
I love the Usual Suspects spin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kaiser Sosa.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Exactly. Well, listen, Brian, this has been just a great time talking about this case. I want to remind everybody we've been talking to Brian Beckcom, a partner at VB Attorneys in Houston, Texas. You can look him up at vbattorneys.com. That's vbattorneys.com. Brian, thank you so much for your time. This has been just great.
Awesome. Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure. Like I said, I know we've been trying to do this for quite some time, and I'm really, really glad we finally got together.
Absolutely.